Ishmael Harkness was born in the Atlanta, Georgia area, June the 1st, 1840. He spent most of his early childhood working in the fields with his brothers and his sisters. One day, his master notified him and his family that he would be splitting them up by selling them to the Mann family, who lived in North Georgia, the Cave Spring area. Ishmael and his family took this news extremely hard. Ishmael vowed at that point that if there was ever anything that he could do to unite his family, he would do it. After the Civil War began, Ishmael decided the only way that he could reunite his family would be to join the Union Army. He would have to escape to the north in order to join. It is believed that one of the men's sons aided Ishmael in escaping to New Jersey. There he enlisted in the military, knowing that if he was ever caught, he would be executed on the spot or placed back in slavery. I would like to give you some background history on the black soldiers who fought during the Civil War by showing you a short film clip.
When the Civil War began in April of 1861, it was not legal for men of African descent to join the Federal Army. African Americans were serving in the Federal Navy, but they could not join the Federal Army. It was not until July 17, 1862, when Congress passed and President Lincoln signed into law the Militia Act, that African Americans were allowed to join the Federal Army. In 1862, regiments were organized in Kansas, South Carolina, and Louisiana. These regiments would be engaged in mostly small unit operations and engaged in combat in 1862. However, it was not until January 1, 1863, in the Emancipation Proclamation, that President Lincoln issued an order to his field commanders to receive men of African descent into all armed services of the United States. The Bureau of United States Colored Troops was established on May 22, 1863, with General Order 143. Active recruiting of African Americans began on a national scale in the South, in Union-occupied territories, and in the North. In the Western Theater, African Americans would fight in May of 1863 in the Battle of Port Hudson, the first major battle in which African American soldiers are engaged. In the Eastern Theater, African American soldiers would prove their mettle in the battle at Fort Wagner. The 54th Massachusetts would lead the assault, the failed Union assault on Fort Wagner. African American soldiers by the spring of 1864 would become a major part of those Union operations in Virginia. Under General Ulysses S. Grant, they would fight in the battles at Petersburg, and they would go on to earn distinction, with 15 Medals of Honor being earned in the Virginia theater. And at Newmarket Heights, in September of 1864, they would capture the closest point captured to Richmond to that date. And they would go on as members of the 25th Army Corps, the only Army Corps in American history to capture Richmond, Virginia. African American soldiers would serve throughout the rest of the war, earning the respect of their generals. An Inspector General report that inspected a regiment out of Mississippi, the 3rd United States Colored Cavalry, reported that the superior status of that regiment was a reason why Negroes should serve in the active service. It was their service in the Civil War that leads to their enlistment in the regular army. In 1866, 6 regiments of African descent soldiers were established in the regular army, 4 infantry regiments and 2 cavalry regiments. When the army was downsized in 1869, 2 infantry regiments would remain and 2 cavalry regiments, and these soldiers would go on to earn fame as Buffalo Soldiers.
After Ishmael fled from Georgia to Cleveland, Ohio, he enlisted in the Army of the United States as man. He was 20 years old when he enlisted on the 16th of November, 1864. He served as a private in the 48th Regiment, United States Colored Infantry. They fought on the Gulf Coast and throughout the United States, mostly in the southern states. Ishmael and his fellow troops proved that the colored troops could fight extremely well and deserved to be in the military. Ishmael participated in many major battles with the 48th Regiment during the Civil War. He participated in the battles along the Gulf Coast, from Vicksburg, Mississippi to Rodney and Fayetteville, Louisiana. He also fought in the Battle of New Orleans. While in while fighting in the Battle of New Orleans, he came down with an illness and spent a great deal of time in the hospital. Many people believe that he had malaria. Malaria was one of the deadliest diseases during the war. While in New Orleans, his regiment lost 4 officers, 59 enlisted men, as well as 464 enlisted men to disease. After Ishmael got out of the hospital, he continued to march along the Gulf Coast and fighting in